Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask-strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1026 for October 15th, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
I really love the blending side of what we're doing. It's super fun and really great. I find it really passionating. It's really a fun way another way to experience whiskies, because you see them in their rawest, simple form when they're coming out the barrel after all the thing that the distiller has put into it and all the time has put into it and all the warehouse and people who've been looking after those barrels put into it. And you're taking to it and seeing how glorious it in its own right, but then seeing what can be done with it in a grander sort of family, in a scheme as it joins with other barrels.
We're going to do something different on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. I had the chance to spend some time with the folks from Widow Jane Distillery this week, including a blending session with head distiller and blender Sierra Jevremov. I recorded the blending session, and I'll share some of it with you on WhiskyCast In-Depth. That's just ahead, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Robin Redbreast? You may have seen me around. Face label, label face. Yeah, that's the one. I'm now contractually obligated to be their spokesbird. Yeah, my agent didn't read the small print.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
How about a really great 12-year-old Scotch whiskey? I have a stellar recommendation coming up for you in just a minute. Spoiler alert, it's Dewar's 12-year-old.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Kentucky is about to get a massive new distillery in Elizabethtown, though it's not likely to be part of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. The $350 million Whiskey House project is being built by Bardstown Bourbon Company veterans David Mandel, John Hargrove, and Daniel Lind, and will focus on contract distilling. It'll open next summer with a capacity of more than 7 million proof gallons of whiskey annually, with plans to double production by 2027. We finally have more details on the distillery project led by Maker's Mark veterans Denny Potter and Jane Bowie. Groundbreaking was recently held for their new Potter Jane Distillery in Springfield, Kentucky. When it opens in 2025, the distillery will focus on contract distilling for other clients while laying down stocks of its own whiskey for the future. Let's update a story we brought you several months ago on the Hearach Trust's distillery in Scotland. The stills are being fabricated at Forsyth's in Rothes right now and will be ready for installation soon. The distillery is on track to open next year. Last time around, I reported on Compass Box's plans to open a distillery in the Scottish Highlands near Fort William on the Inverlochy Castle estate, and that Compass Box founder John Glaser had not responded to our email seeking more information. Heard from John Monday after the episode dropped. He says the project is still in the very early planning process, and there's nothing to talk about just yet. In other news, Buffalo Trace unveiled this year's antique collection whiskeys this week, including the oldest expression of Eagle Rare 17 on record. This year's batch is actually 19 years and 3 months old. The George T. Stagg Bourbon comes in at 67.5% ABV this year and is 15 years and 4 months old. The lineup also includes the William LaRue Weller Bourbon, the Sazerac Rye 18-year-old, and the Thomas H. Handy Sazerac Rye whiskeys. Each one carries a recommended retail price of $124.99, but just try to find them at list price. The Hearach, the debut whiskey release from Scotland's Isle of Harris Distillery, made its U.S. debut the other night in New York City. The whiskey has only been available in Scotland for a couple of weeks now. Chief storyteller Mike Donald says they didn't want to wait too long to bring it to the U.S.
Our Isle of Harris gin was such a huge success in the UK. When we first brought it to the US, people absolutely loved it. Then they learned we were making a whiskey. So it's an obvious market for us. There's a lot of Scottish connections here. A lot of people that love whiskey. We've got some great partners with Misa, Iona, who led the speeches tonight. She works here a lot as well. So just really excited to bring our first dram to New York and then to the rest of the US as well. So it's great.
What does it mean to the people of Harris to have the Hearach out now?
It's incredible. It really is. I think the people of Harris are very humble. They're very softly spoken. They're very quiet. They don't brag or make a big deal about things, but they're incredibly proud of their island. So I think when we send our whiskey out into the world, it is almost our island in a bottle. And I think they perhaps don't shout about how proud they are of it, but I think when we launched on the 22nd and 23rd of September, the whole island was out at our ceilidh. They drank a lot of our whiskey. There was incredible music and dancing. Obviously we had people, friends from all around the world there, and they just loved meeting the people of Harris. I think it was just an incredible launch, and I think the fact that they all showed out and enjoyed themselves and drank our whiskey shows that they are incredibly proud of the whiskey, as are we, I guess.
This was 8 years in the making. There had to have been some hiccups along the way.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I mean, as a storyteller, I have the honour of telling all the stories, but some of them, I'll maybe leave for my memoirs. I think even in terms of the bottle and the packaging, a huge amount of work went into that. We went back to the drawing board on several occasions, and then the spirit. We have a recipe. At the moment, we are on recipe number 18. So we went through 18 recipes to get to the final dram. So that is the percentage of whiskey that we use from Bourbon casks, the percentage we use from Oloroso casks, the percentage we use from Fino casks. So there was a lot of back and forth. We agreed on a recipe around about recipe 16 or 17. We did a formal tasting with the staff, and there were some murmurings that it just wasn't quite good enough. It was a great dram, but it wasn't an amazing dram. So we went back to the drawing board and created a new recipe. So there has been loads of instances of reviewing and changing and finessing. It's not been hugely stressful, but it has been a journey. This isn't something that we've just done with little care or little thought. The attention to detail right across the process has been incredible, and I think the final dram in the glass, we're incredibly happy with it. So it's been a journey.
This is bound to become the island's second biggest export after Harris Tweed. You have some experience with that too, right?
Yeah. I'm a Harris Tweed weaver by trade. They've got a good 120 years on us, but I mean an incredibly iconic product, which I think shares a lot of our values. Harris Tweed cloth is the only cloth in the world protected by an Act of Parliament. So Harris Tweed can only be woven in the Outer Hebrides from wool that has been dyed and spun in the Outer Hebrides at the home of weavers in the Outer Hebrides. So it's a product of provenance and place, and I think our whiskey shares these values. We will only ever make our whiskey in Harris. It will only ever be made by the people of Harris. It will only ever be bottled and matured in the Isle of Harris, and we do that for the same reasons that the Harris Tweed industry protects itself, is to create jobs and protect people's livelihoods and make sure that the fruits of our labour are shared amongst the community, and it's not done in some mainland city or in some warehouse far from our island shores. The other parallel we had is Tweed is it's beautiful. It's an incredibly beautiful, complex fabric, and it gets better with time. If you've got a Harris Tweed jacket, the more you wear it, the more I think it takes on character of its own. This is a young whiskey. The youngest spirit in there is 5 years old. There's spirit there is up to 8 years old. But in terms of Scotch distilleries, we're just beginning. You know, this is a distillery that was built not just for this generation, but for the generations to come. So we're looking forward to releasing whiskey that is 8, 10, 12, 18, 25, 50 years old. I might not be around to enjoy it, but I think we're setting the foundation for something that is truly historical.
The Hearach will be available at first in 15 U.S. states with a recommended retail price of $89.99 a bottle. I'll have my tasting notes for it later on. When Billy Walker and his team acquired Glenglassaugh Distillery in Scotland several years ago, they had plans to create a new peated whiskey brand. Those plans are reality now with the launch of Michael Torr's 4 expressions. The core range of the original, the Sherry one, and the Chinkapin one are all peated to 35 parts per million of phenols, while the limited edition annual release of Turbo is peated to a higher level. List prices in the UK range around £50 for each expression. No word yet on plans for export releases. On the luxury side, the Dalmore is releasing a new cask curation series that will be an annual feature for the next 4 years. The initial release focuses on González Bias sherry casks from Spain. Each set will include a 26-year-old finished in a single González Bias 2002 vintage cask, a 28-year-old single malt finished in a 30-year-old Methuselah sherry cask, and a 43-year-old finished in a 30-year-old Apostolis sherry cask. Just 150 sets will be available worldwide. There's no word on pricing. Irish Distillers is releasing an ultra-rare version of Middleton Very Rare. Forêt de Tronquay features a special blend of Middleton whiskies finished in so-called T5 French oak casks from the Terransode cooperage using wood from the Tronquay forest. It'll be available in Ireland, the UK, the US, France, China, Hong Kong, and in global travel retail with a list price of $5,000 a bottle. The Macallan has teamed up with designers Stella and Mary McCartney on the latest Harmony Collection releases. The Harmony Collection Amber Meadow and Green Meadow single malts will be available worldwide, with Green Meadow exclusive to the travel retail market. Amber Meadow will carry a recommended retail price of $210 a bottle, while Green Meadow is priced at $185 a bottle. And finally, if you're a fan of the Glenrothes 12-year-old or Whiskey Maker's Cut editions, it might be worth stocking up on them if you see them on a retailer's shelf. Edrington executives have confirmed plans to reduce the volume of both expressions worldwide in order to focus on their 18- and 25-year-old bottlings. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
If you haven't downloaded the WhiskyCast community app yet, here's another reason to do it this week. We've added new educational content to the app with an interactive course on the craft and adventure of whiskey. It's a deep dive into whiskey history, along with case studies, quizzes, video, and audio content, and it's all free to use. Just download the app from the Apple or Google App Stores and join the conversation with whiskey lovers like you from all over the world. Time now for a look at upcoming whiskey events around the world. Whiskey Live Paris kicks off this coming Saturday and runs through next Monday. The Manchester Whiskey Festival is Friday and Saturday in Manchester, England. Sagamore Spirit Distillery's final Whiskey on the Waterfront party of the year is on Saturday as well. The Whiskey Exchange hosts a tasting of sherry cask exclusives on the 26th in London. The Fraser History Museum in Louisville hosts a Life of the Barrel tasting with Lexington Brewing and Distilling on the 26th. And also in Louisville that same night, the Kentucky Derby Museum has a Bourbon and Bridals dinner with Hidden Barn's Jackie Zykan. Whiskey Fest San Francisco is October 27th, and Whiskey Live Manila is on the 27th and 28th. Finally, the Dornoch Whiskey Festival rounds out the month on October 27th through the 29th in Dornoch, Scotland. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendar at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Gabriel here. The new Dewar's 12-year-old has been completely remastered to be richer, smoother, and more balanced. It's a total winner. It's double-aged in first-fill premium bourbon casks for greater depth and breadth of flavor, with notes of apples, lemon zest, and spicy and floral notes with a long, smooth vanilla finish. The experts agree too. It's winning awards like pros sink putts. In fact, WhiskyCast's own Mark Gillespie gave it a 94-point rating, which is pretty amazing for a 12-year-old Scotch. It's also earned a 94-point rating from Whiskey Advocate. That makes it their highest-rated 12-year-old Scotch whiskey. It's an excellent testament to the skill, craft, and refinement of the world's most awarded blended Scotch whiskey, Dewar's. Drink responsibly. Copyright 2023 Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlach and the Classic Malts lineup. I spent some time this week with a group of whiskey writers visiting the Widow Jane Distillery in Brooklyn and the Widow Jane Mines in Rosendale, New York, where they source the water used to reduce Widow Jane's whiskeys to bottling strength. Part of the day included a blending session with head distiller and blender Sierra Jevremov. She took over last year after longtime master distiller Lisa Wicker left to return to Kentucky. Sierra is part of a 3-person blending team that includes Jacob Mellinger and operations director Michelle Clark, who hosted us in her historic home next to the mines. Now, our blending session lasted about 45 minutes, so I've edited it down a bit to share with you here.
We wanted to give you guys a little insight to how we kind of run our blending program. It's not full because it's just a very time-consuming thing, and I don't want you guys to be sitting here for like 3 hours. I mean, I'm sure you guys would love it, but we had many adventures to go on. But this is kind of an interesting version of sort of showing how we work. So Al works, you've met Al, he drove us here. He works in the warehouse and kind of manages a lot of the warehouse team. And so I will basically say we've got all these products we need to blend, all of them are kind of these blended products through different barrel sizes, but really 15 is as big as we go. They pull those barrel samples, massive lots of each of the styles of the barrel that we're using. They then bring them to me, I then organize them out for the team, and then and with all this kind of how you see it with Glencairn's tape, glasses, notepads, graduated cylinders, and then each one has a recipe. Each barrel has a slightly different size and volume. Kind of on an average, we know how much we're going to pull from it, and so that's then get represented in this kind of micro scale, should I say, within the recipe. So like say we say a 53 gallon once it's pulled, which is usually closer to like 40, is represented by 20 milliliters, and then we represent some of the ones that have larger angel share or loss or just our older whiskeys or things like that, which come in more closer to like 25, with smaller quantities of like 16 gallons comparatively to the 20, and then so on and so forth. And then obviously the last final component is the Widow Jane water. We always put that in there and kind of generally know how much is added, and so we reflect that in how much water gets added to bring it down to bottle proof. We try it beforehand, but also we want to know what it's going to finally be. It's what the consumer's actually going to finally have it taste like, which obviously is very much affected by different proofs. Things open up. Sometimes it's a lifesaver and we're like, this thing's crazy, and then we tone it down with a little bit of water and we're like, perfect. But for what you have right in front of you right now is a 10-year blend, but what I've done is I've made a base blend of 5 of the barrels, and then you have to do the final component plus the water. But I've given you 3 options of components to be that final component, because that's often what we'll do. We'll blend, but then we say, all right, this blend's not working. What's wrong with it? These are the things we find. Someone's too spicy, something's too like this. and because it's not always, we do blend to what we want it to taste like, what we want to drink, but also in the long run we're blending it to be the product, what it is, the 10-year, what it's known for, what we're looking for, which obviously there's some like bright orange notes, but also cherry. Sometimes we like a little bit of creaminess. We want a smooth finish, but a little spicy heat. It's not one of our super old ones where people are expecting it to be super like soft and gentle to drink. They want a little bit of a more fiery body, but without that being overwhelmingly so. It's still a 10-year product, and that's kind of not exactly what we're known for. With like a lovely kind of creamy sweetness as well. And so we will then have to literally taste through every 5 of those barrels. And this is like on the first try, we try it and we go, oh, this is the one that's the stinker, or what we call stinker. They're all great, but they're all different, unusual. We say, oh, this guy's not the one that works. But then sometimes you do go try and through the rest of them because maybe there's something else that's not working. You really it's very surprising to figure out what works and what flavors bounce off each other and change the whole overall blend. And so I've just removed a component. So what you're going to do is you have your graduated cylinders, and then 3 glasses, 3 components. I've labeled them 1, 2, and 3, and then you have watch glasses with the numbers on those, just so you can keep it in order. It does get very easy for you, especially as you start drinking, to like lose track of everything. So we've like all have our own special like science of the way we lay things. We stand at our bar, which you were in this morning. We all stand on that copper top, standing there, and we all have like our nuanced ways of figuring our stuff out and laying it out, and it's a fun thing to see. But graduated cylinders, and so for each of them, you're going to add, for each 3, you're going to add a base blend, which is this guy, amount of, I think it's 34. I can double check that. I'm pretty sure it's 34. And then you're going to then add for each blend, so you're going to do 3, an amount of the component of 10 milliliters. And then 10 milliliters of the Widow Jane water. And then you're going to, we have like this sort of superstition that actually Lisa passed on to us of pouring back and forth between the graduated cylinder and the Glencairn 7 times to just make sure everything's properly agitated and aerated, kind of what would happen if you're dumping the barrels, pumping it, or to sort of replicate that kind of process, because these were like pulled right out of the barrel, so it's like that right first hit. And also it's sort of like a little special spell of good luck that we like to do, and like we all do. I actually now started doing 13 just because 13 is my lucky number, so I do like 13 times back and forth, and then you'll have it, and you can just then taste through, write in your notes, and then just to do like a little fun thing, it's not a competition who's doing the right thing. I mean, I would love to hear what you guys each think, but then we'll taste through and you can like pick which one. We won't talk because that's one of the big things. We always like a vow of silence. We don't, even though you want to start being like, oh, this tastes like this or something like this, especially when we're tasting together. Whenever we're writing tasting the notes, it's so hard to like hold on to what you think it tastes like. You want to share it so bad, but you will very much affect people's palates. As you know, you drink something and as soon as someone starts telling you the tasting notes, it's like, oh yes, it does taste like toffee from like this part of Maine. I've never been there or had this toffee, but now I think it does. So we'll keep it to ourselves, but then it'd be nice to, it'd be nice to then see what you guys think would be the final blend, because this actually did turn into a final blend. See what you see how there's some variance, some differences. There is some tenure on the table. You can try. I gave you guys, sorry, I somehow still didn't manage to bring enough Glencairns, but some of you have rocks glasses, some of you have an extra Glencairn, so you can try 10 year as a kind of like a counterpoint to sort of, obviously we drink it so often that we know what we're aiming for, so we don't have to constantly refresh our minds, but even now and again we like re-gauge yourself on what the product you're actually trying to reproduce in the long run is going to be. But otherwise have at it, and then the water it's all labelled, the water is in your little bottle. If there's not enough water, there is some just like limestone water independently here too. But you should have everything. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer. I mean, there is what the final blend is, but I don't think that's necessarily the right answer. It's just what one of us decided is the final blend, what went forward. But in the long run, one of these barrels will always end up in a 10-year blend. Maybe not this blend, but it will end up in another one. Unfortunately, there is not. I happen to have graduated cylinder here, do you, Michelle?
I just have just cocktail things, so there's not measurements on it.
Thanks. I'm borrowing Ted's.
Sure. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
So sure I counted 6. Oh, you know what it was? I had it, and then I got distracted because I was then doing my own 10-year blending, and I'm pretty sure I started using it. Sorry.
No worries.
So wait, sorry, 34 milliliters of the 10-year and then 10 of the plain water?
So 34 of your base blend, and then each one will then get 10 milliliters of the component and 10 milliliters of the water, and then you just want to kind of mix them up and blend them together.
I cheated off 10.
So 34.
Same question.
Yeah, or you can do them. How we usually do them is like one blend and one graduated cylinder, and then pour between the graduated. But you can do it either way. Neither is wrong. As long as the same quantities go into each glass, same ratios. So 10-10 of the two things you're adding, and then 34 of that case. We do have a little spit bucket or dump bucket down the end. Anyone that needs to dump if they pour too much into their Glencairn and graduated. We obviously are doing quite a few blends at a time, so we often.
So with the 34 milliliters of base in each glass, it's time to add 10 milliliters of each of the 3 barrel samples.
How'd you run 3-4 out of curiosity?
So that's just the. So you're technically. We often. This is using the ratio that I most often do because I know that I'm going to look at bottles literally the size of the samples we get from Lentine. And so if we're going to do sometimes we'll blend with a large, what we call our full size blends, which produce enough for a lot of people within a group to try. But then that often will drain the bottle really quickly, and if you want to rework the blend a couple of times, you'll kind of run out after a point, and then we have to then specifically ask the barreling team to go get that one, and that's sort of a bit of a time suck. So we've reduced it to now half sizes, so one of our like big full barrels is represented with 10 milliliters, so that kind of gives you a clue of what your component is. It's one of those full barrels represented 10 milliliters, and then there's the 2 final full components that equal kind of up to the rest.
I put the same one in all 3.
Oh no! Well, luckily we have an extra one of these guys, so we can just dump it and start again.
And I screwed up and put the same sample of number 1 in all 3.
You just committed to that one. That's the blend you're going for now. Yeah. So you can use this guy. You can just dump these and then pour back out again.
I'll keep one of them.
Keep one as one, because that's the component you did, right?
So if I could have the dump bucket, please.
Yeah, I'll take it down there.
Okay, thanks.
These 2, right?
Yes.
This is water, right? This is water.
Yeah, you also got your little bottle of water too.
Back to the big cylinder.
we work with, different barrel selections. We've actually, as we've been developing as a company, moved a lot of our products into being more blended products versus kind of more straightforward recipes. So essentially making it more and more complicated, but also adding more complexity in that way. So obviously there's the Paradigm, which we just released, which is one of our we kind of relaunched the rye program. So the Paradigm used to be kind of one set source for the most part of whiskey as the base, with then a couple of other additions, and then obviously we would do some staving programs. So we would do the Applewood staving program and the American Oak staving program. But we've now moved and we've got rid of the American Oak one and now released it as the Paradigm. And that one actually now includes a bunch of different whiskeys from different places that we kind of layer in. So we have 2 sources of Kentucky that go into that. One that is got some corn in it and is a little bit more sweet, but in kind of a sort of sweet, spicy, kind of like baking spice way. Then we have a Kentucky one that's actually our 100% rye recipe run down at Castle and Key. So we went down there, worked with them, ran it just on a larger scale. We had a month, we were able to lay down good stock of that. And that kind of brings, as anyone can tell you, obviously there is, well, when it comes to where you are distilling site, the biome that you've built there, they seem to have this really butterscotchy, but like, I don't know, companion bacteria, or I don't know what it is. It brings this really sweet kind of butterscotchy notes. That kind of was brought in there. And then there's this like the Indiana that's in there. It's got that kind of fruity, more floral notes. And then finally the New York has this lovely, like really straightforward spice that goes into there. So we've now made it into this thing where we're making this complex blend across multiple states using multiple barrels versus what it used to be, which is a bit more of a kind of like blending across multiple barrels of the same source. And the Applewood now reflects that a little bit more too. Slightly different. We've actually kind of made them a little further apart from each other rather than being sisters. Now they're like cousins or second cousins, where they have slightly different blends. There's a little bit more nuance there. But yeah, the Decadence goes through actually several cycles of different blendings. We initially blend the first stuff, then what is going to go into the barrels with the maple syrup, and then we blend after they come out of the barrels again. But then we have the Lucky 13, which is a whole new recipe of blending. We have the Volks we just released, which has the finishing, and then that one's really nuanced. And like also with that one, we do a lot of like rest time as well, and taste it as it rests to make sure that those older barrels are developing in the way we want to as they sit and mingle and all that stuff. So there's like a lot of, I mean, as you can tell, I really, really love the blending side of what we're doing. It's super, super fun and really great. I find it really passionating. It's really a fun way another way to experience whiskeys, because you see them in their rawest, simple form when they're coming out of the barrel after all the thing that the distiller has put into it and all the time has put into it and all the warehouse and people who've been looking after those barrels put into it. And you're taking to it and seeing how glorious it in its own right, but then seeing what can be done with it in a grander sort of family, in a scheme as it joins with other barrels. How, maybe it's not lacking anything, but it can be built upon rather, which is kind of really fun. And then sometimes, you can find some whiskey that you're like, okay, this one just went kind of kooky in the barrel. All right, it was in a weird part of the warehouse, whatever. But now compare it with that other weird one, and together they make the perfect pair. They work together, or pair it with a more subtle, gentle one. So it's constantly evolving and lots to learn. It's really fun and fascinating, and it's also really fun talking to people who, obviously we do this on really small scale right now, though we've churned out a decent amount, but we're still keeping it on the small side. Everything's small batch blending every time. But it's really interesting to now start talking to people who work at really big distilleries who are also that component, that blending component, but they're doing 30 to 100 to 150 barrel batch blends, and seeing how they do it and what their scheme is and how they are moving along, and kind of that fine line between artistry and craft, and also just very, very exact science. And sensory panels is something I'm super into right now. And as you said, there's a lot of science that's coming about, what music is being played when you're drinking something completely affects how you, or eating something really affects how you taste it. So we have jokes where it's who's doing the blending playlist today? All their blends are going to be better than everyone else's because they're vibing with it, it's going with their flavors. But yeah, obviously the aroma, the light, everything is just those slight nuances. So I try and revisit blends we did in different circumstances. We were blending at 97 degrees, and then we were blending at 60 degrees. Our distillery is completely untemperature regulated everywhere, so we get everything. So tasting the blends we blended at 97 versus tasting them at 60, and things things like that, I like try to revisit to them just to like, you know, check on them, see how they how they hold up to different circumstances and things like that, which is really fun as well.
You mentioned the 3 different states that you're pulling whiskeys from. Do you ever foresee a time when Widow Jane will be using 100% of its own distillate?
I don't know. I think that's going to be in the future, really. I think that's going to have to be in the future, as you saw that our distillery site that we had planned and have been in the works, so that new distillery site has been in the works for since pre-pandemic. It's been there for a long time. That's obviously one of the hiccups we came into, but there's been many, many hiccups along the way. And you've already obviously seen the like current distillery site we have. And I think just at the rate we're growing and the customer base we have, I just right now don't see the future of that being anytime immediately soon. But I do start seeing maybe some products coming out that are small limited. We do have stuff, it's just been distillery exclusive. We released some of them in other states when we first started up, and that was kind of the ones that have born the Baby Jane. So that's our heirloom corn varietals. We have the Wapsie Valley, the Bloody Butcher, which we started with, and then those 2 hybridized into what was the Bloody Butcher, the Baby Jane, misspoke there. And we have a 1 to 2 year edition of that is pure New York juice selling, and then obviously you tried that wheated rye that we had, and things like that. But at our current barrel stock, probably not quite yet, especially for the age statement the age that we feel like it's honoring the whiskey best to release it at. But I really would say never say never. I think there's always going to be a blending size where we are still always sourcing, but there will be products where there will probably be maybe more lean towards 100%. It's just not in the books yet, just because of the state of where we are.
And there's something to be said for sourcing whiskeys too.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think we always will probably have that, because we just love this ability to work with distilleries intimately and see what other people are doing. It's like we don't want to like limit the kitchen that we're dealing with, like of ingredients that we're working with, and it's really fun to be able to pull different nuanced characters. I mean, that's like very New York of us, right? New York is not one thing. I mean, there is the New York identity, there is like the local quality as well, but it's also about like pulling food from everywhere and like, not say fusion, but it's like, you know, how all those work together to build like a beautiful end product, this great dish, this final product that is just how we like it. And so I think, yeah, I mean, you can tell how much I love the blending aspect, and I love that sourcing aspect. And, you know, Kentucky just makes amazing whiskey. Tennessee just makes amazing whiskey. Indiana. And so I don't particularly want to move down there because I don't like driving, and I'm very aware that they're driving states. So I'd rather be able to stay in New York and also have access to amazing whiskey. So I love that. That's why I really love the paradigm is like this new way of where we're like now. I'm like, New York, just the stuff I'm making is another one of those whiskeys we're sourcing. It's another one of those components. It's meeting amazing Kentucky juice. It's meeting amazing Indiana juice, and together they're like work. I'm with these great distilleries and another component, which is just, you know, the honor of that is just amazing. Yeah. All right. Has everyone got a chance to try their blends? I'd love to hear opinions. No rush, obviously, at your leisure. I try not to rush my compatriots on the blending team either. But yeah, if anyone's starting to feel the vibe opinions.
Is it better to be fast or slow sometimes with tasting? Because, like, you know, you want to give something proper time, but also sometimes your first impression is the most accurate.
One thing is also to like, I always taste in multiple directions, so like, and what rinse between and sometimes don't rinse between. Obviously there's always, whenever you do a tasting in Kentucky, you always do, which I just assume you guys are all whiskey aficionados to a large part, you always like want to sip some whiskey first and just like not judge it, because your mouth is going like, whiskey, like this is going on, there's a lot going on. Obviously the first sip is always like hot because it's the first whiskey you're putting in your mouth, so you let that kind of chew, let it acclimate, and then go through. So I never like drink the first one and go, I don't like this one, and then just move on and never go back to it. I always like go through 1, 2, 3, and then I'll do 3, 2, 1, and then I'll do 2, 3, 1, and then like try through a couple of times just to see which one's affecting. Sip water in between, sip water out. You guys also have the ability to try some of your components. These bottles aren't going to be used again, so you can sip from the bottle if you want to. Try them barrel strength, try them as they stand by themselves, because you kind of obviously you're seeing how they are being affected in the major blend. I'm sure it's probably the difference can be sometimes incredibly stark, sometimes can be more nuanced. But I think really in the long run, I think there's a nice happy medium between that two styles for sure. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, this is taking me too long. Just make up your mind.
I'm also glad you said about the chew thing, because I got some out of my bag from earlier. And everyone's like, I hope they're not looking like, you really need whiskey at bad right now. I was like, let me get it out now.
No, it's a good idea. Yeah. That's why I wanted you guys to do like the 10-year maybe. Because like you just like, that's 91 proof, that's at barrels, that's at the proof, so you can chew it over a little bit and just like acclimate your mouth a little bit. But yeah, no, I think when we're doing our blending sessions, we try and keep it to a decent amount of time. Don't go too crazy, because you can get really wrapped up, and then sometimes I just have to call like a blend if it's just not working. Because also we have to, our palates are only going to go so far. You're going to exhaust it. So you guys are doing this 3 for 1 blend. Imagine doing 3 for 6 blends every single time, / maybe 5 blends, trying it every time. Usually when we taste the components, I try add a little bit of water just to prolong my palate, but after a while it just knocks out. So in the long run, it is my job, so I can't do it at too leisurely a pace, because I have to make sure that the blending team, the barreling team, has their product that it needs to go into bottle and everything like that. But also you want to take your time, so you also want the whiskey that people get in the bottle to be good and delicious and exactly what we want.
For the record, none of us on the panel picked the right sample. It was sample number 1, though I should have seen that coming when I poured sample number 1 into all 3 glasses at the start of the session. Thanks to Sierra Jevremov, Michelle Clark, Jacob Mellinger, and the entire Widow Jane team for their hospitality this week. Full disclosure, I was Widow Jane's guest as part of a press trip, but as always, full editorial control over this episode remains with WhiskyCast. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Let's start with the latest release from Widow Jane, the 2023 edition of the Vault's 15-year-old bourbon, using whiskeys distilled in Indiana and Tennessee. It's bottled at 49.5% ABV, and the nose has touches of caramel, toffee, toasted oak, dried fruits, and a hint of cherries. The taste starts off with a bit of cherry cola, then the spices kick in with cinnamon and black pepper on top of caramel, toffee, red apples, apricots, and honey. The finish is long with subtle spices and dried fruits. I'm scoring Widow Jane's 2023 The Vault's 15-year-old bourbon a 93. Next up, let's look at the debut release from Isle of Harris Distillery, the Hearach that we heard about during the news. It's matured in a combination of ex-bourbon, Pinot, and Oloroso sherry casks, and bottled at 46% ABV. The nose is both buttery and malty with touches of dried flowers, heather, and honey. The taste is thick and chewy, fruity and floral, with notes of apricots, peaches, pear candies, subtle hints of spice, honey, and vanilla. The finish is long and fruity with a lingering touch of allspice. It's an excellent debut, and I'm scoring the Hearach a 93. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, our tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 200-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, Sagamore's team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature Double Oak, Cask Strength, or Reserve Series ryes at a retailer near you. Visit SagamoreSpirit.com and please drink responsibly. Glenglassaugh recently revamped its lineup with a new 12-year-old and 2 no-age statement expressions. The 12-year-old is bottled at 45% ABV, and the nose has touches of heather, honey, seaweed, and dark fruits. The taste has a nice complexity with notes of honey, barley sugar, and subtle spices on top of plums and raisins. The finish is long and warm with lingering spices and a hint of caramel ice cream topping. I'm scoring the Glenglassaugh 12-year-old a 92. And let's wrap up with the Octomore 14.3 Isla Barley single malt from Bruichladdich. This one is made with barley from Isla's Octomore farm, peated to 214.2 parts per million of phenols, and bottled at 61.4% ABV. The nose has a nice balance of peat smoke, charcoal, heather, dark honey, and plums. The taste is peppery and peaty with an explosion of peat smoke and creosote that does not overwhelm touches of heather, honey, and tropical fruits in the background. The finish has a lingering smokiness and touches of tropical fruits. And I'm scoring the Octomore 14.3 single malt from Bruichladdich a 93. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,500 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. Two homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the inbox now for our community segment presented by Waterford Whisky. Had a lot of comments on last week's interview with Outlander star Sam Heughan after the Outlander universe of fans picked up on the interview. Carolina posted this comment on X. Lovely interview. I think it's really impressive to watch Sam create these spirits with such attention to detail and authenticity. Winning all of the awards are a testament to that way of thinking. Great quality products with amazing design. Just great. Anna Laura at Explosion of Love axed this comment. I adore hearing Sam Heughan discussing his baby Sassenach whiskey. The passion in his voice as he discusses the creation of it, his kitchen laboratory, and everything else is truly special. He's an inspiration, knowledgeable, dedicated, and much more. Love when he's in his element. And thanks to everyone who posted comments and shared the interview with their friends this past week. Louise Broadbent shared a post in the WhiskyCast community app from her visit to Tasmania this week with a photo from Sullivan's Cove Distillery. Had to share a photo of the sign since distillery tours are on hold while they renovate and expand the distillery. And finally, Peter Sprunger posted a poll question in the app this week. I'm staying at a hotel with Pappy Van Winkle 10 for $150 for a 2-ounce pour. Would you do it? 85% of those responding said no. Just 15% said yes. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app from the Apple or Google App Stores and join the conversation. You can also find us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whisky, where they explore the frontiers of natural flavor one farm at a time to create unique Irish whiskeys. Visit them on the web at waterfordwhisky.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. One of the more widely used expressions about a whiskey is that it has legs. Legs are the term for the trails a whiskey makes as it flows down a glass after swirling, and they're an indication of the whiskey's viscosity. Legs are caused by surface tension between the water and alcohol in a whiskey as the whiskey evaporates, and scientists refer to it as the Marangoni effect. Now, Italian physicist Carlo Marangoni wasn't a whiskey expert as far as we know, but the effect can be a useful gauge of a whiskey's strength and character. Legs that take longer and move more slowly in a glass can be a sign that the whiskey is heavier, thicker, and oilier than a whiskey with fast legs. They can also be a useful gauge of bottling strength, since whiskeys with slow legs have a higher alcohol content than whiskeys with fast legs. It's also a useful way to tell whether a whiskey has been chill-filtered, since filtering removes the fatty compounds that can cause long legs. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the Whiskey Photo of the Week, and of course a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast Community app. Download it today from the Apple or Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Find the new Dewar's 12-year-old and discover what all the awards are about. You can toast and thank me later. From Dewar's, the world's most awarded blended Scotch whiskey.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.